Hey guys, thank you so much for tuning in to Koozcast number dos, which is Spanish for two. I'm here today with our special guest, Brian. Brian, say hello to everybody.
How's it going, everyone?
Thank you so much for being here, Brian. Brian is a longtime friend of mine. We grew up together in high school, right? Hunting, fishing, all that good stuff. We were in the military together for some time. So thank you so much for being here, Brian.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So, quick recap, guys. We got a lot done this month. Got some fishing done. Our muzzleloader testaroonie thing we did that didn't go too hot, but hey, like I always say, that's reality TV for you. Take that to the bank. What else did we do? Yablika. We said some Russian words like that. Cowboy coffee. That was phenomenal. Guys, seriously, try it. I know what you think. Like, that's a lot of work to make coffee, but I promise you it does one bang up job. But, anyways, so Brian, you excited for turkey season? That's coming up here soon.
Very excited for turkey season, ready to hit hard.
Yeah. In fact, dude, I swear, this morning I was getting ready for the day and I heard a turkey outside and I was like, whoa.
Oh, that gets me so pumped. I'm so ready for May 1st. So
Right.
ready. So ready.
And a lot of people, if you don't hunt, and Brian can attest to this, if you hear a turkey gobble in the woods, it is the coolest thing you'll ever hear in your life, minus if somebody were to say you won $1 million. But anywho,
There's nothing better than that sunrise coming over the ridge and hearing that first turkey strike a gobble. Oh my God. Makes the hair on my arm is standing up right now just talking about
I
it.
know, right? It's a very distinctive thing, gets you really pumped up, ready to go. But
Absolutely. Gets the blood pumping, that's for sure.
and it's crazy. Like before you know it, it's gonna be what, May in a few weeks, and then
Yeah,
it's
about a
gonna
month
be
here.
summertime, and then after that we got deer season, which I cannot wait for.
Very excited to get back in the deer woods. I had a lackluster season last season, so uh, can't wait to bounce back.
Yeah, no, I can't wait either. Last year, I learned a lot personally. But it's crazy. I was thinking about this this morning, right? So I've been hunting. This will be my 15th year hunting.
Wow, it's a
Isn't
long
that?
time.
Yeah, it's almost 20 years. Isn't that something?
That is something. We've been doing it what 5, 6 years together now.
Yeah,
Yeah, and I mean we both came from our own separate paths. We did our own separate ways. We learned our own separate things, and we both converged after the military and started hunting together. And kind of went, kind of took it from there. And I mean, I've learned so much in these past 5 years
yeah.
just through those experiences alone. So
And that's the wild thing. Excuse me. We still look at ourselves as very young, but
oh,
that's
absolutely.
a long time to be hunting. You know what I mean? Like imagine if we took somebody that never went hunting before, we brought them into the woods tomorrow, they wouldn't even like understand half the stuff we know.
Absolutely. Woodsmanship is definitely a lost craft in this world, and stuff like Onyx and stuff like that is making the generation now much less appreciative of those woodsmanship skills.
Oh, believe me, I get that from my old man a lot. Now, for you guys that don't know Onyx, it's a really super duper fantastic app where it shows you property lines, so you can find public hunting access
No free ads.
locations. No free, or would you say?
No free
No
ads.
free ads. But it's a really cool app. You can track like one time we'll get into this later, but one time me and Brian tracked a bucky hit, and you can click a button and put like a blood drop, right? So we could actually see on the map the
Where we
direction.
were walking.
Yeah,
It follows like right along where you're walking, so you know as you're walking, you're getting that real time feedback of this is where the deer went. You can see if he makes a loop back. A lot of times, deer when they're hit, they'll make a big circle back. So it
yeah.
just helps you kind of track that, not get lost in the woods.
Super cool app. And I am not a tech guy, I'm not a big phone guy, but definitely a go to thing to have, I would say. But speaking of which, so what's your story here, Brian? How'd you get into this? How did you become like me and the other idiots that decide to go sit in the cold for X amount of hours?
So it is a long story. I'll try to keep it short. So my dad got me into hunting when I was probably 6 or 8 years old. Me and my dad would go sit out in the woods, and I'd take a 22 with me, and it would start with just sitting, waiting for squirrels to come by,
The
and I'd
American
shoot.
dream, brother.
We'd shoot squirrels and take them back, and my mom would freak out and yell at me and tell them to get rid of them. So then we would go dump them. But from there, eventually my dad took me into the deer woods during a sit, and if I remember correctly, the first time we went up onto a hillside and we picked a log because my dad didn't want to take me into a tree stand, and we just sat on the log, and my butt's never been that cold before in my life. So, from there, it progressed. I eventually was able to get into my own tree stand by myself, and at the age of 15, I shot my first deer, which was a doe. Shot it opening day of shotgun season,
Wait,
November
hold
18th.
on. A doe, a female deer, like the song. Sorry, uncalled for. Sorry.
Yes, a doe, a female deer.
Thank you for our viewers out there.
Shot her on opening day of gun season here in New York, which is November 18th.
Mhm.
Was an awesome, awesome hunt. Got to share those memories with my dad and my mom,
Yeah.
and I'll never forget those. And then a couple of years later, I eventually shot my first buck. And all this was done with gun. I never, not until after the military did I get into bow season.
No archery. Yeah.
So this was all done with a rifle, 30-06 that my dad had. I never took a shotgun into the woods. I was always a rifle guy.
Yeah.
So shot my first buck actually out of my brother's tree stand, which is set up completely for a lefty shooter. My brother is a lefty.
Good, you.
Which is just, he's crazy for that.
Make it work, right?
So shot that buck out of a lefty tree stand coming from behind me. It was a fun shot. That was actually, I gut shot him, so you know how that smells.
Yeah, that's try to avoid that, but it happens, right?
It happened on those big jobs.
Yep.
And then I kind of went cold. I didn't really shoot anything for a while there. And then I got into the military, and man, was I itching to hunt in the military. We served at Fort Drum, and Fort Drum has this great training area.
Lovely place.
And the wildlife out there is just insane.
It really was, though. I mean, there were times on the 4th of July we'd have off, and me and my buddy would go up there trout fishing.
In that quarry?
Well, that too.
Okay.
That was kind of off the wall. Me and my buddy were up there just throwing spinners in really deep water. And yeah, he caught a nice rainbow, but there were a variety of streams there. And I've seen black bear there maybe 2 times alone just trout fishing up there. And apparently there was a moose. I don't know if you've ever heard that, but
I didn't hear that rumor.
Yeah, apparently there's a moose wandering around the Fort Drum training
It wouldn't
area.
shock me, honestly. The conditions up there near the
Yeah.
Appalachian Mountains or Adirondack Mountains.
Adirondacks.
Up there are, suitable for a moose habitat.
Yeah.
Just to backtrack a little on that quarry, one time, me and my buddy, we dropped our canoes in that quarry and went fishing, and I pulled up a trout. We were doing the same, I was using like a metal spinner.
Yeah.
And we dropped it, I was dropping it all the way to the bottom, I was just jigging it up, and I pulled up a trout that was probably the biggest trout I've ever caught, a rainbow trout.
Yeah.
Thing was huge. We cooked that sucker up, it was so good.
Yeah, no, I bet. It's funny, that quarry, same buddy of mine, we went out there, same thing, we're going to do some fishing. And we get there, and this guy has a flat tire, right? So,
all the way up there, too. That sucks.
Yeah, and for our viewers, it's quite a hike. I mean, from the main, I wouldn't call it a highway, but, like
main road.
Yeah, it's probably about, what would you say, 30, 40 minutes?
Yeah, you're driving probably like, what would you say, 10, 11, 12 miles?
Yeah, all on dirt roads, too.
Crappy dirt roads.
Yeah. Kicks up dust and chalk and stuff.
Rocks everywhere.
So we get up there, and this guy's got a flat tire, right? So we get out, talk to the guy for a minute, and mind you, if you've ever changed like a flat tire on gravel or like dirt or whatever, it usually sinks. So that was like a challenge. But anyways, long story short, we changed the guy's tire for him, did some fishing, got totally skunked, didn't catch a thing. Then on our way out, we got a flat tire. So we're running around through the woods trying to find a rock big enough to put underneath the the jack, right? Because it was sinking.
Oh yeah.
And then flash forward 2 weeks. Guys, if you didn't know, I was actually an MP, military police. Um, but
Not me.
we
I was
actually,
part of the good guys.
yeah,
I was in infantry.
actually, I'll tell you later. I have a funny story. We met this guy at lunch today. He was an infantry guy. I thought of you, but
Rockheads.
but no, we love all our brothers and sisters in arms. But no, we arrested a guy. It was the same guy that we changed his tire,
Oh,
and he
geez.
recognized me. He's like, "You helped me change my flat tire." I'm like, "Yeah, how you been, man? You catch any fish?" "Oh, yeah, not really. It's been a rough summer. I just been beating my wife up and stuff." And
I
they're
just
like,
need you to turn around.
"Yeah." I'm like, "Yeah, you can't do that, pal. But I hope you make out well fishing tomorrow or whenever,
Whenever you get
whenever you
out.
get out of jail. That's good." But yeah, I would say I started hunting 14, I think I was. Shot a deer doing a deer drive. Never recovered it for reasons we're not going to talk about on camera. I'm just kidding. Or am I? No, I'm kidding. And then, yeah, I started bow hunting the year after that. Did not shoot a bow until did not shoot a deer with a bow until, what was that, 3 years ago, remember? I hit that one.
The one on the A site
Yeah.
that I was with for.
Yeah,
Yep.
the little one.
Yeah, I wasn't gonna say it, but
Well,
yeah.
you know what? Meat is meat.
If he said it, Bambi.
Meat is meat, guys. Kodiak Kooz has to eat. Shame.
Either way, go on.
But it's funny. Like all throughout high school, I always did pretty
But
decent.
just to interrupt, by the way, he shot those with my broadheads.
That's true. That day we literally showed up. I don't know why, but you're like, bro, try this. And I put it on like my arrow and boom, it did one bang up job. But drop that deer. That deer came in, to be honest, it was a really easy harvest. That deer was probably about 10, 12 yards away from me.
The dream.
Yeah, literally, picture perfect. It was broadside to me. Double lung shot, ran 50 yards and dropped.
And then here comes Mama.
Yeah. To be
What
fair,
did you do to my child?
I let some deer go. It was opening day this year. And for you guys that don't know, our opening day for archery here is October 1st. Yep, October 1st.
Yep.
Which here in the east, we have a lot of foliage, so a lot of leaves and stuff like that. The woods is very thick compared to out west, so that makes it kind of difficult.
One of my favorite times of the year. You can be a ninja.
Yeah, very little visibility for you and them. So I kind of want to talk about different methods of hunting. So we have like ambushing. For those that don't know, that's essentially you sit in a tree stand. There's a lot more that goes into it. As far as finding different, bedding locations, places where they eat. We have still hunting, which is what I really like. And this year I feel like I really honed in on that skill. As far as moving through the brush really quietly, you need rainy, snowy, wet conditions, or else you're just going to be heard. At least here in the east. Out west, it's obviously not like that. There's not leaves scattered all over the ground like here.
Yep.
And then we have deer drives, which deer drives, for you guys that don't know, very dangerous but very rewarding. If you do it, I suggest you go with people you really trust or people that know what they're doing. And essentially what you do is you find a chunk of woods, you send people to one side, and the other people go through it. It gets way more complicated, but the goal of it is to push the deer out into the other guys, right? And then they take out the deer. But Brian shot a beautiful buck on a deer drive one year. How about you tell us about that?
Yeah, so me and Cody, let me backtrack a little here. So me and Cody hunted, we didn't really start hunting together until we were older. We've always known each other, and we always known we hunted, but we never hunted with each other until later in life. So when we finally started hunting together, Cody introduced me to state land, and state land was
Right,
an
yeah.
eye-opener to me. Like,
You were a big private land guy.
yep,
I forgot about
so
that.
my whole life I grew up just private land, and that was you could only go here, there. You were trapped within boundaries. when you introduced me to state land in Miami, my eyes were so big. I mean, I can't even imagine what you saw on the first day that you took me on state land. And I mean, I just all these ideas running through my head of where I could run to, and just so many things. Either way, so get on state land, and I start learning. I, I immediately just learned so much more because private land, you get to know your land really
Right.
well, but if you don't have that deer density on your land, leaving sign and laying clues for you to be a detective, you're not really learning anything. When you
Excuse me.
get oh, you're good, bless you. When you get onto state land,
Hmm.
there's so many more animals, and they're leaving clues all over the place, and that's one of my favorite parts of being in the woods is just playing detective and trying to piece together what happened maybe an hour ago there or maybe
So
7 hours ago there.
what would you say was like the biggest piece of private land that you grew up hunting? Like how many acres?
I mean, our personal piece was probably 30 acres, but all together, like friends and the area that I was able to have access to and hunt,
Yeah.
probably around 400 acres.
Okay, so big chunk of wood
Big
still.
chunk of woods, but there's other hunters hunting that woods. There's a
Right.
lot that goes into it. You got to get permission to go onto other people's private
Sure.
land and everything
Not
like
a
that.
lot of wandering around type
Exactly. You
stuff.
can't just go
Sure.
from one piece to one piece. You never know who's going to be in a tree stand or something like that.
Hmm.
So you're still kind of confined to a certain area per
Right.
se. But to go back into that big buck story, um, when he first introduced me to state land, like I said, I got all these ideas going. I really dove deep into buck bedding and like the signs of it and how you
Hmm.
knew you were there. And Cody brought me to this place, and it just was a heaven for deer.
Yeah.
And he didn't know it, I didn't know it, but all the signs were there. I mean, this piece of property butts up.
Oh, you're talking about where you shot the buck.
Yep, yep.
Yeah,
So this
yeah.
piece
A
of
lot
property
of
butts up to two farm fields, and it's just like a narrow, narrow, very narrow strip of woods. But it gets some pressure, but it's pretty overlooked by most people, I would say. And the beginning of this woods is just this thick, like
like a pie shape.
yeah.
Like if you imagine like a pie, like
That's not what I'm
sorry.
getting at. The stem count in this very beginning part. So as you walk up to this very narrow strip of woods, the very beginning part of it, like the little corner piece of the pie that you would cut out, that piece is so thick and tangly. There's only two trails that go through it. There's a very small doe trail, and then there's the buck trail that goes through it. And you can tell it's the buck trail because it's a little bit wider where they want to bring their racks through, and the doe trails kind of go in through some pretty thin trees where they can get through.
And I will say it is incredibly miserable to crawl through that.
You're for anyone that's been through the military MEPS program, it's duck walking. You're basically doing that through the whole piece of
Yeah,
woods.
yeah. You're getting wet and muddy and
You're on your hands and knees. You're crawling on all fours in some spots.
yeah, you got to go around these big things of thick brush and you're getting pricked by briars and horrible.
So this beginning piece of woods, most people would just walk right by it because you can't get in there with a tree stand. You can't get in there on the ground and sit in there and hunt. Like it's physically impossible to shoot a bow and arrow in there. So most people just walk right by it. But every time me and Cody walked by it, and we hunted, I don't know, probably 5 or 10 times leading up to this hunt at that specific piece of property and that specific piece of woods.
Well, I remember all bow season, I would tell you about it. Excuse me. So, for context, me and my family and some of our friends, we have always done that deer drive. And like I said, guys, a deer drive, you put people on one end of this little thick section of woods, the other guys push the deer to them, right? So we've always done this drive year after year. And generally, I would say 1 out of 3 times you're going to bump some deer. But I remember I was telling you about it, and you were like, really? Like, it actually works, huh? And I'm like, yeah, like, I swear to God. And then, as you'll tell everybody,
So, uh, where was I? I forget what I was saying.
You said you're going to write Kodiak Kooz a check for
I'm
$10,000.
not going to do that, but
Okay, disregard.
um, either way, this, oh, I was saying you couldn't hunt in there. Like,
Right. Yeah.
and we kept walking by it.
Right.
So every time we'd walk by it, I'd notice like all these rubs, and not just like your typical one-off rub. Like trees were destroyed, like destroyed in there. So it really got me thinking like there could be something big in there,
Mm-hmm.
or hanging out in there, hanging around there per se. And there could be more than one with how many trees were destroyed, marking territory and everything like that.
And guys, just for reference, if you don't hunt, a rub, so there's a rub and a scrape. So in the fall, a lot of people don't know this either.
Do you mind if I explain this?
Yeah, actually,
This
perfect.
it's kind of my expertise here.
Yes,
So
sir.
a rub, generally what you're looking for in a rub, and the difference between the two is one's on the ground, one's on the tree, and one they're using their hooves and one they're using their antlers. So a rub is going to be using their antlers and they're going to be rubbing a tree. Usually not a hardwood, usually a softwood like an ash. Um, and generally they're rubbing their velvet off their antlers. But they also mark in during the rut, which is a time frame between November 1st and 15th. They are chasing after women per se,
Lady deers.
lady deers,
Good and you.
and they, rub trees to assert dominance over other deer, mark territory, and also they have a scent gland on their antler that other deer can smell. So
On their antler.
Mhm.
Oh, I never knew that.
Yeah, right on their tines.
Yeah.
There's a little gland right there, and that marks the tree as well.
I will say, man, you are the master at reading rubs.
I appreciate that.
Like, you will take me to a tree.
I
And,
did a lot of studying.
yeah, and you'll be like, oh, yeah, it's this kind of buck. It's this, age, whatever. It's truly incredible. I'd never,
And
learn that much or that.
and the big thing you're looking for is, you're not necessarily like people get super excited when they see a big tree rubbed.
Yeah.
And that can be super exciting. That can mean there's a big deer around. But you really have to take, like I said, being a detective before, you really have to take that step back
Mm-hmm.
and look at the tree and ask some questions. When was this deer here? Why was this deer here?
Mm-hmm.
And when you start to answer some of those questions, you can kind of piece together a time frame of when that deer may have been there.
Right.
So a lot of times a tree turns like an orangey color, and it really just depends on the kind of tree the rub. Some of them can turn like a green if it's like a really maple or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And that color is very distinct for like 30 to 45 days. And that color usually generally fades after that time frame. And then it'll still be moist to the touch. But once it starts to dry up, and then it'll turn like a light brown, that's when it's turned, it's been a few months or so.
Yeah.
So you can, and then older, like historical, like year and year past and older, those are usually really dried up.
Right. Dark brown.
Yeah.
Gray looking.
And what you're really looking for is height on a rub. You want that rub to be almost up to your inner thigh, your knee area. That tells you got a good 2-year-old, 3-year-old deer. Something that's rubbing really close to the ground, that could be just a year-old deer. And younger deer tend to rub everything.
Right. Yeah.
They figure out they have antlers, and they just start rubbing. And then you have scrapes, and scrapes are probably the best thing you can hunt over early season when you have them on a pattern, and then also during that rut time frame. And
oh, sorry, real quick, for those that don't know, can you go into the rut? Explain what the rut is.
yeah. So the rut is, like I said, that time frame between November 1st and 15th. Male deer bucks are breeding. It's the breeding season. So they are chasing after lady deer, and they are looking to lock down a deer that's in heat or ready to be bred. And they are looking to get that deer solo and do their thing.
Mm-hmm.
They usually spend a day or two with the deer and then move on to the next one. And that it is a great time to hunt because these deer are so focused on the other lady deer that they just make so many mistakes, and they walk places that they shouldn't walk, and they
catch them with their pants down.
Absolutely, you catch them with their pants down is a great analogy for that. And just to get back into the scrapes, Scrapes are usually a big area of the ground marked with their hooves, and you'll see some leaves blown back, and sometimes you can spot them through the woods, like they stick out like a sore thumb, just like it just doesn't look like it belongs there.
Or it's beautiful when you're walking through and there's leaves coating the entire forest floor, and you walk up and there's just a beautiful circle with no
Dirt.
leaves. Yeah,
Yep.
dirt, and you
Yep.
see some deer
You,
footprints in the middle of it. And
and again, you have to take that step back and ask why that's there, and when that deer's there. And generally, if you a good rule of thumb is if you see some leaf litter on top of it or some sticks have piled up on top of it, that
probably
scrape
old,
hasn't
huh?
been reopened. It's either not in season, like they're not using that at that time frame, or it's just you just missed it maybe.
So, real question here: will they use the same scrape year after year, or just the same vicinity?
Generally, um, a, what I would call a community scrape, which
Mm-hmm.
is generally near a bedding area, that scrape will be reopened and reused year after year.
Mm-hmm.
Same with rubs that mark bedding areas and specifically buck trails.
Mm-hmm.
Those rubs will get hit usually pretty good year in and year out. It all depends. Like if you kill the deer that's in that area, it might take a
Right.
year or two for another deer to move in that area. But generally, once a buck figures out a way to use an area, other bucks tend to use the area the same way.
Right.
And so you may see a year or two where it doesn't get hit, but then a deer moves back into that area and it'll tend to start using those same trees, same
Sure.
scrapes,
Right. Right.
same pattern usually.
So, tell us about, to go back to this buck story. Tell us what that was like.
So it was late season. So this is after archery season. Me and Cody got our butts kicked during archery season.
Yeah, it was not that rewarding, but
We busted the effort was there.
we hunted a lot. I think that
Yeah.
was the COVID year, right?
Uh, yes, this was the COVID year. So we hunted. We saw a lot of. I passed on a lot of deer that year.
I did not.
I shot the buck that you talked about that I shot at, and we tracked, and
Yeah, yeah.
I didn't end up finding. I shot that buck that year with the bow.
I actually sat there, I think, at the end of bow season. Yeah, that day I was still hunting, but that's a story for later.
And so either way, we put in the hours. We put the effort in, and it all led up to December 20th, I believe it was.
You got it down to the date, huh?
I believe it
I would
was.
too, man. That was a
I looked
beautiful buck.
when you invited me on the podcast. I looked at the buck picture this morning, and
Yeah.
just to remember the story a little bit. And that day, me and Cody met up at our piece of the woods that we were going to push, this pie-shaped piece of the woods that we talk about. And just that day, I happened to be the lucky guy that got to go to the other side of the woods. And
Boom!
me and Cody often, we try to keep it fair. If he pushes one day, I'll push the next day.
Flip flop.
Yeah, you don't always want to be the greedy guy that goes over there and is the shooter. You want to be the pusher sometimes too. You gotta.
And I will say, sometimes being the pusher, you get a deer. I think it was last November, opening weekend of rifle season.
Yeah, you just got to be very careful. That's a safety hazard.
Yeah. Well, yeah, exactly.
You got to know where your people are.
Big enough. That's a really good point. I'm glad you brought that up. Again, if you guys get into hunting, or if you do hunt, if you do deer drives, please
Wear orange.
wear orange, of course. Understand where everybody is, right? It should be rehearsed. You should practice it.
You should have shooting lanes.
Shooting lanes, all that good stuff. But even being a driver or a pusher, I shot a deer last year doing that. And when you're going through the brush, you want to go nice and slow, just like you're still hunting, right?
Yep.
And boom, I walk up, there's a deer. It's laying down, it looks at me, I look at it, jumps up, boom! But dirt nap. But yeah, no, you're absolutely right. We like to switch it up, make sure everybody has a fair chance to shoot a deer.
And it just so happened that day I drew the lucky card.
Yes, sir.
And I got to go over and be on the sitting side. So Cody, we walk down a dike, which for people that don't know what a dike is, usually an elevated piece of land that's on both sides of water, and big enough to drive a truck down. And we walk down that path, and we get to this piece of woods, and I say sayonara to Cody. He tells me good luck. Don't shoot me.
Yeah, that's always something good to say.
uh, and then I get to walk in, and I walk. It takes me, 15, 20 minutes to get over to the other
Yeah.
side. And then normally, me and Cody, just from being in the military, we have a general idea of how long it's going to take us to walk somewhere. And then just knowing the piece of property, we know generally how far that was. So me and Cody can do it without communication and just doing it on time frames. So I'll be there at 7:20. You can start to walk at 7:22.
Yeah.
And I'll be ready. And when you're, doing it with other people, you probably should have walkie-talkies or get a phone call or a text going or something. But, that day I think we did it off of time, if I remember correctly.
Yep. Yeah.
I got over there and I set like a time hack, and I got set. And I knew at that time hack you were going to start walking, so I started looking. And Cody's coming through the woods. Nothing's happening. It's quiet. And just to set the scene, at the end of this piece of woods, it opens up into this beautiful shooting lane. And it's a goldenrod field, I would call it.
Yep.
And at that time of the year, it's all like matted down and laid down, so you can see good visibility, 50, 60 yards down the lane.
Yeah.
And then it hits like another patch of woods and then opens up into that cornfield that we talked about. And I was set up at the very base of this shooting lane, this goldenrod field, basically where the farm field, the goldenrod, and this thick piece of woods all came together. And I sat there. Well, I was standing, but I'd set myself up there. And Cody's pushing through the woods, doing his thing. And all of a sudden, I hear just a quick, almost like this deer had gotten up and just kind of like moved a little bit, but I still had never seen him. And I thought it might have been Cody coming out of the woods, but I didn't see any orange. And usually when we come out of the woods, we give like a little whistle or like a little, hey, I'm over here kind of thing. And so I just kind of kept looking. And then all of a sudden, I just saw the top of this rack walk out of the woods.
Oh,
And
talk about the hair standing up on the back of your neck, huh?
I was excited.
Yeah.
It had been a long time since I've seen some antlers that big in the woods. And I was actually using Cody's shotgun.
Yeah, funny story about
We
that.
had switched guns before that drive because I had a scope on mine.
And you don't want to use a scope for a drive. I mean, you can.
It's
but
just you get into some close quarter situations, and you want to be able to just swing up the gun, and it's just easier to have that bead sometimes. You can get away with like a low powered 1 to 5 scope, 1 to 6 scope kind of
or
thing.
red dot.
Yeah, even those, you can get away with that. But either way, I pull up the gun, and I could just see the top of his rack, and then I could just see the top of his back, but I couldn't see the vital sign, or the vitals where to shoot. And so I just kind of followed his rack down to where I thought it should be. And I took a deep breath, and in the bottom of that breath, I pulled the trigger. And I remember him letting out like a loud, ugh, like a grunt. And he fell. And right there he fell. And I remember I gave Cody, or I can't remember if you yelled first or if I yelled first.
You did. So I was.
Because I think I was trying to figure out where you were.
So, and that's the weird part, which we'll get into in a minute. But generally, every time I've done that drive, and I'm the pusher, usually as soon as I hit that chunk of woods, I hear a shot. Like they hear you, it's so thick in there that as soon as you step in there, they hear you and they're out. But there's also been times where I've done the whole drive and I come out on one side. There's that little creek there or that little ditch.
Yep.
And I've seen them circle back around me. So they're real sneaky. But so when you shot, I was right at the end. Like I could almost see the path if it wasn't that thick.
And there's a reason for that.
There is.
And this deer had a hurt leg, which played a huge factor into how long this deer sat. And he was willing to wait until Cody got within maybe, because you even heard him get up.
I was probably 30 yards away from him, if that, maybe closer.
Because remember telling the story back, if I remember correctly, you said you could hear him get up too.
Yep.
When he stood up. And he must have waited until he either smelled Cody or was just super uncomfortable enough
Yeah,
with
he
Cody.
was like, "That's it. I'm
Because
getting out
he
of
was
here."
either hit by a car or someone had shot at him the week previous because his back leg was pretty busted up.
Yeah.
And when he walked out, I put him out of his misery. I had to shoot him one more time
Mm-hmm.
with your shotgun. And then I think I yelled because I wanted to figure out where you were because I knew I had to shoot him again. Because when I got up over him, he was still, I could see breath coming out of him. And I just wanted to put him out of his misery right then and there. And I saw the leg and, you know.
It was a miracle we got it, you
Yeah,
know,
absolutely.
because we don't want the animal to suffer, and you know, so it was a good thing you got the deer.
Absolutely. And I wanted to shoot again, but I wanted to figure out where you were. So I think I gave a yell like, Cody, give me a yell where you at.
Yeah.
And you gave me a yell, and I
With
think you were off to my right, like kind of still, and I was able to shoot again and put the deer out. And then you came out, and I remember when you saw the thing, your eyes lit
I
up just
was,
as much as mine when
I
you
could
walked
not
out.
believe it, man. I could not believe it.
Yeah,
You
you're
know,
probably thinking I shot some doe or
and
some 4-point
that's
or
the
something
thing.
like
I don't think
that.
I asked you either. I think I just came out, and then I was going, "Oh my lord, that's a beautiful
Yeah.
buck, man."
And we both put our hands on those antlers.
Yeah,
It was something else.
it was a beautiful deer.
It was an awesome deer. That was, and we know we got to share that memory together. It was awesome.
Absolutely.
You know that I pulled the trigger that day, but you were just as much part of that hunt
Yeah.
as I
Team
was.
effort, man.
Absolutely.
So I really like still hunting, and you always told me it could be done. My dad is super good at it. He really, I think he only does it in the snow. He's going to be watching this and yelling at me later. But last year, I was sitting in that same spot that we mentioned earlier where you hit that buck and we tracked it. And it was super rainy out. It was actually with Chief Tim. He was sitting in my favorite stand, the Scarecrow stand.
Good stand.
And I decided, you know what? It's windy, it's rainy out. I'm going to go mess around. And mind you, I had my bow with me too.
Best way to do it.
Yeah.
My favorite way to do it.
So I started wandering around. Ooh, my computer's talking to me. Started wandering around and, you know, walking, I don't know, step for step, you know, looking every which way, real quiet like. And all of a sudden I see a deer maybe 30 yards away, circling around me, just walking real slow. And I could not believe that it did not see me. And obviously, for our viewers in the West, they do sight and stalk, which means you climb up to a high peak. You sit there, you look with binoculars, you find the animal, and you move to the animal. However, conditions in the East are a little different. We have a lot of deciduous trees, which, you know, that's when the leaves fall off, right? Instead of big pine trees everywhere. So hunting here is a lot different than it is out west. Also, not going to get into it, but mule deer, elk don't. I would argue their senses aren't as keen as a white-tailed deer. That's what we have here in the east. But anyways, I couldn't believe it. I was within 30 yards of this deer, and I drew my bow back, and you'll laugh at this because I'm notorious for missing, especially with my bow.
Yes, he is.
And yep, and boom, gave it a nice belly haircut, no blood. It was beautiful, but I was so proud of myself.
Just for walking up on it.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of hunters out there, especially in the East, that just don't do that.
Absolutely. And a big thing of it is people are told they can't, and people grow up tree stand hunting. You know, that's what their dad and their uncle and their grandpas teach them, and
Yeah.
people get set in their ways, and nobody wants to try something new. And I wouldn't even say it's something new because it goes back to the Indians
Yeah.
hunting with bow and arrows on horsebacks and hunting with spears and tiptoeing through the woods with spears and putting animals down that way. So it can be done, and a lot of it has to do with conditions. You know, on that day it was rainy,
Yep.
it was windy, and if I had to guess, I would guess that wind was blowing from where that deer was standing to back towards you rather than from your back towards the deer.
Yep.
And, you know, that deer never smelled you because that's, you know, deer don't have the greatest sight, but
Their smell.
their smell and
I
their
mean, if
hearing and their smell is so good.
I read one somewhere, maybe I heard it. I think Steve can't talk. Steve Ranella was talking about it. When a deer or an animal like picks up your scent, it's essentially like it just got smacked in the face, right?
Absolutely.
So it's not like us where we'll I don't know, go by a dumpster and go, ooh, it smells kind of funky. For them, it's boom, there's something around
Predator.
here.
And even when a deer sees you, you may be, there's so many factors. You could have the sun behind you. You could be in a shaded tree, like under a shaded tree, kind of. You could have a background of leaves that are making it really hard to pick up what you are. And a deer may just spook off and it won't say human. It'll just say
Threat.
something's weird there. Something's off and I got to get out of here. So their seeing isn't the best, but when they smell you, they smell human
Yeah.
and they know it's human. And it, like you said, it just smacks them right in the face, and
Right.
they know you're there. You're busted at that point.
Yeah.
Normally, you get the two snort wheezes
Yeah,
and a
that's the
couple
best.
bounces out of there, and you hear them. They're off into the distance.
There were so many times at Fort Drum, I'd wander around and find a really good looking spot, and I'd sit down. And again, because the wind wasn't at your favor, you hear that almost immediately. You don't even see the deer, and it's gone.
And one big thing, if you want to learn the wind, without just looking at like the weather or whatever like that, because you should be doing that. That's really important. But when you're out in the field, there's so many different things that can change wind. If you're in a hill, if you're in an open field, wind can just blow straight. If there's buildings, if there's trees, it can bounce and do all sorts of funny things on you. So my personal strategy to attack the wind is milkweed, and you can find milkweed just in a lot of areas, and especially in the Northeast.
Yeah.
We walk around the swamps that we walk
It's
around,
everywhere.
and it's everywhere. So I usually just pick up a couple pods, throw them in my pocket. When I get home, I throw them on the table and let them dry out. And once they're dried out, I take all the milkweed out of it and put it into a Ziploc bag. And then I have like a little pouch that I just have carabiner onto my setup, and I can pluck milkweed out of that. And the best thing about milkweed is you can watch it, and the little mist sprays that you can get will tell you what your wind's doing in your immediate, like where you're standing.
Mm-hmm.
But you can watch that milkweed go down where the wind's blowing, essentially, and then it might hit a wind swirl or hit a thermal, and it pulls up or it pulls down or it swirls back or
Yeah.
it swirls left or it swirls right. So you can really gauge what you're doing off that. And honestly, you can overthink it, and you're never going to get your wind perfect. But if you can shoot it off into a direction just generally where you don't think the deer are going to be coming from, or where you want your shooting lanes to be, if you've blown it off behind you or to the side of you, you're usually in a better spot.
Yeah. What I find amazing, as far as still hunting, excuse me, which I'm still a rookie at, deer drives I feel pretty good at. I've been doing those since I was 14 years old. Stand hunting, but what I really like about your method is you have what's called a saddle. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, the new craze, the saddle.
Yeah, that's the new thing.
So I got into it 2-3 years ago, I'd
Yeah.
say, and Cody was skeptical.
A little bit, a little bit. Not gonna lie, I was.
But it goes back to the whole Cody took me onto state land and my ideas were running, and we were sitting a lot on the ground, and it's uncomfortable and
Ticks.
butts get cold, and then you're sitting in other people's tree stands just hoping like they don't come by. So I wanted to have a way to hunt state land the way I know how to hunt,
Without going through the process of going out there, setting a
setting
stand
up tree
up.
stands, and
Now you're restricted to that one spot or two
yeah.
spots, however many stands you decide to set up.
So I have a completely mobile setup. I use, again, no free ads, but I use the tethered system. I have the first generation system. Excuse me. But I also use 3 climbing sticks from Hunting Beast, and that gets me usually 15 to 20 feet in the air. I can get about, just depending on the tree and the situation. And that allows me to go wherever I want in the woods, to whatever terrain feature I want to go hunt, whatever food source I want to go hunt. And man, I mean, it is so comfortable. It's amazing, and it changed the game for me, that's for sure.
So, can you give us a breakdown, a basic breakdown of what it looks like here, just for our viewers that have never heard this before?
Yeah, so it's almost like you're sitting in a hammock, but the hammock, the best way to describe it would be if you've ever seen a person that climbs trees to cut trees, an arborist. They wear like a tree harness, and it like goes around your legs, and it has like loops that go around your thighs and everything like that to really secure you in. The problem with that is if you sit up for long periods of time, like you're hunting 5, 6 hours, or actually it's probably not long. It's probably like 3 to 4 hours usually. Blood circulation can get lost because those can get tight and restrictive.
Really?
So this just goes around your hip, and there's a belt that goes around your hip, and then there's two loose straps that come up through your groin area, and they connect to the saddle, and then it's just a hammock on your butt area, and you sit in the tree. You're tethered in by a rope to the tree, and you can swing 360 degrees around the tree
That's what I like about it.
and fully be able to shoot
That's gotta be
wherever you
nice.
want. And if you're really good with your setup, you can have your last stick that you use to get up onto your platform as a way to pivot around the tree, and that's how I usually set my sticks up as well.
So let me ask you this. So you're like me. We both like to wander pretty far back
Yep.
for the most part. Not
I
always,
like to
but
get away from people, you'd say.
right. And a lot of people, or at least I've learned this for my one specific spot. I love to hunt opening day rifle season. I will get there and there'll be 5, 10 cars parked on the road and they're all within the first 100 yards off the road. And I
Absolutely.
and I go back and you hear no shooting down there, but I think they mix up the wood so much that they push the deer up to me.
It's a lot of scent.
Yeah, a lot of
You get 10, 15 people in
packed into.
in a general area of the woods. Deer can smell that, and they're all not being quiet, I'm assuming, and
But
there's a
so
lot of factors that go into that. Yeah.
for your setup, does the weight ever bother you as far as walking in and out?
Absolutely not. So my whole setup altogether, and it really depends on what I'm doing that day,
Yeah.
the area I'm going into, what I'll bring. If the weather's rainy or not, I'll bring some rain gear or extra clothes if it's cold or whatever. But generally, my setup weighs no more than 12 pounds.
Mhm.
Like very light, very lightweight, and that's with a backpack, my bow, like that's including everything. So very lightweight, and I generally have when I enter a wooded area, especially if I see other cars there, I generally have three rules for myself to get away from people. I'm either gonna outwalk them, I'm gonna outclimb them, so I'm gonna go up in elevation to somewhere someone doesn't want, or I'm gonna cross water. And water is a really good way to get away from people. A lot of people don't want to get their feet wet,
Yeah.
and you bring an extra pair of socks, or if you're just can mentally tough it out, you'll or get some good waterproof boots, you'll be fine. And cross water, you can generally get away from people, and that's my rule of thumb. So a lot of times you don't even have to go back that far. You can either just climb an elevation or cross a terrain feature that someone else doesn't want to cross. And
Dude, something I really want to do next year. I don't know if you remember that spot you dragged me to scout this year with all the poison ivy.
yes, I
And
remember all the spots.
for those of you that don't know, I'm deathly afraid of poison ivy. I get it really bad.
I don't.
Brian is a lucky man.
I walk through it, and I look back, and he's 50 yards behind me, tiptoeing through the same stuff that I just plowed through.
I see it and I get it. But that whole swamp area, I would love to take a canoe back there and really push into some deep stuff where the bucks go and run and hide that people just can't access.
Absolutely. That would be an awesome thing. You know a guy with a canoe?
I got a canoe.
Oh, there we
There's
go. We're
actually
good.
a big hole in it because somebody may have put an arrow through it, but I'm working on fixing that.
Well, there you go. No, yeah. If you can do something different on your access to get away from people, whether it be take a boat upstream, even like some public areas like around here, like the Finger Lakes, you can get on a boat and go to a wooded area, tie your boat up if you got a little John boat or whatever. And
Yeah.
get into some great stuff that it would take people hours to walk to.
Right.
So, if you can change something up, you don't have to always go back as far as me and Cody do. You can generally get away with some things and find some overlooked areas that way.
Absolutely. Well, all right. I think we'll wrap it up here. Brian, thank you so much for coming aboard here, sir.
Thank
We
you so much for
appreciate it.
having me.
Appreciate your service. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for your service.
Absolutely. Good and you. Thank you guys so much for tuning in here to Koozcast number 2. As always, make sure you check out our other videos. We have tons of cool stuff like exploring caves, cooking cowboy coffee in the woods, building fires, doing some hot tent camping, all sorts of good stuff. And of course, we got a lot of cool stuff planned in the future. We got hopefully a nice canoe trip on this really super duper amazing reservoir. Trout fishing. I'm in the
Hopefully it
middle of
doesn't
that.
sink. Same canoe he put a hole in.
We're working on it. It's in the works. But thank you guys so much. Make sure you guys like, comment, subscribe, and stay tuned for another fantastic adventure and future podcasts or Koozcast. I think that's what we're calling them. Go ahead and have yourself a Kodiak Kooz day.